inclusive investment decisions. So may I please request our speakers to now take the stage. Chavi Upaveja, Associate at Low Capital, Janavi Papliwal, Associate Partner at Circulate Capital, Snehal Verma, Co-founder and Director at Nature Dots, and facilitating today's session are some of the most experienced leaders in the field of gender lens investing. Juhi Joshi, Director and Senior Partner at Climate Collective, Shruti Deora, Partner at Intellicap, and lastly, Kritika Jervam, Climate Finance Sector Portfolio Manager at Aegis Fossil Development. Thank you to our esteemed, thank you and to our esteemed facilitators, and you can now take forward the session.
Hello, good evening everyone. Thank you for being here. I know it is the last event of the very long conference, but we thank you nonetheless for joining us. Today's session is co-curated for you by GROW, Greening of Finance by Women, the Climate Collective and IIC. I will briefly introduce GROW before I move on to Joy. I'm Kritika Jerome, I'm with AFD and I would be one of your moderators today. GROW or Greening of Finance by Women is a professional network which works at the intersection of climate, gender and finance. It's part of a larger initiative called the Green Indian Financial Systems, which was co-created by AFD, SIDBI and Shakti Foundation in 2021. When we were having conversations on key challenges and bottlenecks to greening of finance, we also noticed a huge gender gap in the ecosystem. And there was a very real possibility of exacerbating this gap if we did not include women in the dialogue and in the transition from early on. On the flip side, we also found evidence that women leaders or firms and companies with women leaders have showcased better ESG or climate performance. So with this dual perspective, GROW's mission was created where we sought to leverage and promote women's participation, their leadership and their knowledge for greening of financial systems. And today, the session will be focused more on women entrepreneurs working across different sectors but also in climate. Thank you. Over to Julie.
Hello everyone, good evening, and thanks for being in this session. I'm a part of Climate Collective Foundation. We work to support climate tech startups, so we work in the niche of climate technologies and across the spectrum of climate technologies. So we work in the traditional sectors of energy tech, mobility tech to support startups there, but also going beyond in the realm of adaptation and resilience startups, food technologies, water technologies, climate smart agriculture, waste, circular economy, and so on and so forth. And in this whole space, we take an ecosystem approach to building up climate tech startups. So really looking at it holistically on what support is needed in terms of corporate deployments, access to capital, community and other services, etc. One of the key things that we do is also look at diversity, because when we first looked at our portfolio about a year after we started off our operations, we saw that our portfolio was about 12% women founders, and that's when we realized that no, we need to put in very active efforts to get more women into the space. And so we started off with our Women in Climate Entrepreneurship Initiative, which is now grown quite a bit. Now our portfolio is about 33% women founders, which is great. And another portion, what we really want to focus on is getting more investing into women-led startups and also more women investors, and looking at a gender focus on the investment side at the intersectionality of climate and gender. So very happy to be in the session, and very happy to have Snehal here as well, who's one of our portfolio startups, co-founder of Nature Dots. We'll be hearing from her.
Hi everyone, I'm Shruti from Intellicap. I lead our work at the intersection of climate, gender and financial inclusion. So we've been supporting GROW since its inception and been supporting across program management, design, strategy and implementation. Apart from GROW, we are also working across the ecosystem in climate, agriculture, gender, financial inclusion, livelihoods, WASH. And we are an ecosystem player where we get together investors, both GPs and LPs, and supports entrepreneurs with technical assistance across the value chain of doing strategy, advisory, research to implementation, program management support on the ground as well. Today we are specifically going to be focusing on also working with fund managers to have more inclusive sourcing pipelines and having tools and techniques. So we worked with, in one of our earlier assignments, we developed an entire toolkit with MIT D-Labs. So we'll be doing like a workshop based on that, on how we can ensure that we have more equitable sourcing and source more women entrepreneurs, because we hear one of the biggest challenge in the ecosystem is there aren't enough women entrepreneurs. And that's what we hear from all investors that we speak to. So here we are trying to address that and address practical solutions that we can take into account to address this gap. Thank you.
Great. Hi everyone. So I'm Snehal. I'm co-founder of NatureDots, and we are a deep tech startup working in water security, essentially water quality and quantity de-risking for different stakeholders and water users, be it community members working on food production or water utilities, or even business partners such as hard-to-abate sectors with more data and information. So yes, we are one of the portfolio companies for Climate Collective, and they were the first ones to sort of, I would say, find us and work with us to help us reach at this stage. Currently, we work with around 1,500 freshwater fish farmers and have 15,000 hectares under active management. So I'm looking forward to sharing more and learning more from this workshop.
Thanks, Nehal. Hi everyone, this is Janvi from Circulate Capital. We are a circular economy focused fund. We have $250 million of AUM across Latin America, South Asia and Southeast Asia. We invest across two investment strategies. First is the private equity strategy, where we invest in the recycling infrastructure. We support companies across the value chain of waste collection, segregation, sorting, recycling and downstream conversion. And from this fund we have invested in 7 companies in India, 4 in Southeast Asia. And we have an innovation strategy wherein we invest in early stage startups who are solving for plastic products at the material science level. So these could be deep tech companies working at the product level across the world. And we do $1 to $2 million check sizes from this fund. Broadly speaking, while we invest in the circular economy, and that's very, very impactful, we also realize the importance of creating an impact to women in the entire ecosystem, because they would be the most impacted in case of climate-related catastrophes, being the most vulnerable in the circular economy supply chain. Think of waste pickers. You see most of them being women. Think of employees in companies in waste management. Most of them are women. So unless and until the supply chains are strong and resilient, and unless and until the women employees in this supply chain are empowered, these businesses itself would be quite vulnerable to external shocks. And hence we focus a lot on empowering women at the ground level. We also focus a lot on empowering women in corporates and HOs, because we believe that there's a very strong correlation, and this has been proven in several empirical studies as well, that companies which have gender balance do perform well. So at a fund level, we have a very strong women representation at the senior leadership level, and we encourage our portfolio companies also to bring in about that change. And we don't just have check marks, or we don't just report numbers, but we also work with them, handhold them to implement various strategies to ensure the women employees are well taken care of, but also are able to grow within the organizations. And employees also create a atmosphere of a genuine appreciation and respect. So I'll pause here and allow.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, I'm Chavi. I work at a fund called Lok Capital. We focus on 4 sectors mainly: financial services, health, agri and climate. In climate we have a very similar strategy where it's 2-pronged. We look at both early stage deep tech enterprises, and we look at also late stage investments in climate. Lok is a 2x qualified fund where we have committed 30% of our capital to be deployed into women-focused or women-oriented companies. We have a natural bias towards companies that benefit women customers more than male customers. So some of our financial services entities would have more than 50% of the borrowers being female, where they're running their own MSMEs, and we would also obviously encourage female founders. Um, yeah, so I think in terms of introduction, that's about me and my fund.
So we just first dive right in because I think the primary audience here is also investors, and we just want to hear from the founder herself. One, being a woman founder, what has been the fundraising journey till date? What are the experiences? Also, the other co-founder is a male co-founder, and so kind of want to get those dynamics in as well on how that affects the fundraising journey. And the third one is also at the intersectionality of climate and gender. So there is a very good example of a water tech company that works very close to the community. And so do you also show how do you look at your impact KPIs and so over to you, Sneha.
Great. No, so I will break down my answers in stages. So for us, as a deep tech company working in climate space, but also specifically in water, it has been sort of a mix, I would say, mixed experience, where when we started working at Nature Dots, when we started building our product, we were looking at what are the different kind of funding resources that are available. Essentially because it is a new tech, so there is a learning curve which we also found was there from the investor perspective. That's where our first funders were the government partners or the customers themselves, because it was a hard problem. Then came in Climate Collective also, who had some understanding around how systemic solutions would work. Up until now, we've raised only non-dilutive capital because we found that to be the most patient capital, which gives enough space to experiment and figure out our own GTM much more effectively. As it's a super complex space, right? Climate and then water. So how do you navigate that? In terms of venture capital funding, we also have our own due diligence metric where we look in for whether the funds have experience of working with women-led startups, have experience working in emerging economies, dealing with hard problems, and could understand how we have different why we work with community members, but government and also businesses all together. So these are some new models where we felt there is a slight learning curve which we would want to see in the VC space and private equity space. Also, there are definitely unconscious biases that do creep in, even if whether people want or not. So how do you sort of mainstream this gender investing lens on top of impact investing? And across whether it's developed market or emerging, you've seen a slight aggressive mode of attitude towards fundraising. And sometimes that aggression sort of be reimagined. Where is it coming from? Is it just on the bottom line or also on the impact space which that startup is creating? So for us, the main thing was, along with having been revenue positive, maintaining our profits and break-even pathway, what was the impact that we were also creating on the ground? So that's why our journey has been so, but the patient capital has been transformative for us, and we now actually want to look forward towards more reimagined funds in VC space coming up here. And on the third part, since we work with community, we've seen, so we work with around 1,500 freshwater inland fish farmers. These are one of the most climate vulnerable food system which is not getting so much focus, but in that 1,500 we also work with 135 to 175 women fishers, and we use our tech, so we create digital twin of a pond and a big water body, but the community members get access to all this through a simple mobile app which we co-created with them. We've seen the difference in how women fisher folk interact with it and how the male fisher folk interact, and in terms of their de-risking capacity, the steps that they're taking, how differentiated they are. So that's the data and evidence how we have found, like, if we want to make some groundbreaking change, we need to have women champions sort of owning that tech system. And if you work something with them, you're able to cater to a large team. So I'll stop here.
I think that was a very good summary, and thanks for spelling that out, Sneha. If I can just summarize in the one, our just investor education on the hard to understand tech sectors beyond the traditional climate tech sectors, that's one. Second is just hard to fundraise on the private capital side, and we'll talk about it in the next session from the investors themselves on these hard to invest sectors and what change do we need. And the third are definitely the subconscious biases that creep in,
If I can add one more thing here, I think, I believe we were one of the lucky ones who had access to network capital because of the education we have received, but there are huge segment of women entrepreneurs who don't have that network capital to help them fundraise or also get more learnings in terms of what are the different financial models they need to work on and confidence building. I think that's an ecosystem support we really need.
Absolutely, and that's like I think one of the key points for the enterprise support organizations out there on really focusing on the women entrepreneurs, building capacity for fundraising for sure. The subconscious biases, and the other portion is like working with the communities where some of portion of the community is also women, and then how different is the impact when working with women community versus a men community. We'll also come to that in one of the other segments where we talk about the impact metrics and how to showcase a gender lens to the impact that's created. But thanks, Sneha, for sharing that.
Thanks, Neil and Joy. I think maybe I'll come to the investors in the room. Chavi, if I can come to you first. Could you? Okay, sure. So one of our panelists has a flight to catch, so I'm going to go to Janvi first, actually. Could you perhaps share your experiences and if possible, some specific examples on how you would integrate gender at the sourcing or due diligence stage? I think that would be useful for the entire room.
Sure. Sorry for snatching the mic. I have a flight to catch, and hence I thought let me quickly add my comments and then leave. So in our sector, which is climate infrastructure, it's very hard, to be honest, to find women entrepreneurs. We have one co-founder as a woman in one of our companies, but that is a tech-led business, and it's one of the very rare companies we have invested in from a tech perspective. All our companies are infrastructure based. So there's very little we can do in terms of having women-led enterprises be a part of our pipeline. But as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of women workers in the companies that we invest in, right from waste collection to waste segregation, and hence it's very important that the founders of these companies have a mentality towards women's safety, women health and hygiene, which becomes very important to ensure not just their safety and security, but also the resilience of their own business. And not just within their own organizations, but even across the value chain, right? Their suppliers, the tier 2 suppliers, all of them would have women workers. And hence, what we propose to do with them is build some frameworks, and we discuss all of these things right at the time of our diligence process, so that they're not in for some surprises. They also allocate some part of the funding towards these kind of activities. So we have a responsible sourcing framework, wherein after investment we work with our companies to work on certain principles, and one of them is gender equality and gender parity. So we go down to to their supply chain, visit them and ensure that certain things are taken care of, right? Like having separate washrooms for women, because some of these women don't even have access to washrooms. They're not clean. Very basic things, but these determine the quality of their work environment. flexible work times, ability to work remotely is not possible in this kind of a setup, but giving them flexibility. So all of these things are discussed at the very beginning. Of course, we also talk about tracking various KPIs. Apart from business KPIs, we sit across the table and discuss impact KPIs. A lot of it is about the tons of plastic that they're going to divert from landfills, the CO2 emissions, but also the number of women in their organization and their supply chain, wages, etc. And we ensure that we give them heads up about how we want to work with them on ensuring that these metrics are actually met. Another important aspect at the division stage is that we also have a lot of women leaders in Circulate Capital. In fact, we are one of the very few rare funds where we have 60% women in leadership within Circulate and 50% women across the fund. And at the diligence stage, naturally we'll have a lot of women doing diligence and negotiating with the founders. A lot of times founders in this kind of a sector do not come across women leaders in their business dealings internally as well as externally. And working with women on negotiations, on diligence, gives them good exposure towards women leaders and encourages them to onboard more women leaders in their organizations. And that's a subtle message we do want to share with them during our investment process. So these are some of the things we do at the diligence stage, and I hope that helps.
No, definitely it helps. Thank you so much, and sorry for the delay as well. I know you're trying to catch. I think it's very true. The change actually starts from your own operations and what you implement within them, and the influence that an enterprise has on its supply chain is also often misunderstood or underestimated. So I think these are very practical ways to make sure that it's a safe and a fair place for women to work, and there is more female employment as well. I'll come to you, Chavi, now. Some examples.
Thank you so much. Apologies for leaving quickly.
Thank you. Thank you. Some examples from your experience on how you would actually look at integration when you're looking at sourcing or due diligence.
Right. I think one thing that was talked about here was unconscious bias. And I think the perfect way to solve unconscious bias is to be more conscious, right? So what we do is, and this is something that has been proven to be very helpful, is for the team members as well as portfolio companies, the key decision makers in the portfolio companies, we do an unconscious bias assessment. So unconscious bias assessment can be within two aspects, whether it's associating women in fields of science versus fields of humanity, or it could be associating women in various gender roles, when it comes to cultural aspects, home level responsibilities. Do you have biases in your mind towards that? So I think that is one assessment that, there are various resources available online, and that can be very practically implemented to all the investment team members, to your founders who are hiring women. And I think one second aspect very important is, as active portfolio managers and business owners, is to always ensure that an open position is looked at very equitably. So sourcing resumes for a position as 50% women, 50% men comes a long way. And that actually taking that effort of finding qualified women may take some hard work, but it always proves out to be the best. Women are the most loyal employees I've ever seen. So I think these are some of the things that we take care of when it comes to sourcing, and having the investment team perspective changed in terms of looking at certain of these biases. You mentioned that we should talk about some real life examples, and I spoke to some women asking if they could share something as silly as even some kind of bias they've faced in any kind of meeting. And there's one bias that I always hear of, is that the person next to me doesn't make eye contact to me. So I think that's as simple as that. I think and making the person opposite to you aware of the fact that she felt that you did not make eye contact and did not give her enough confidence goes a long way. And once that person in the room is aware, they always take care of it. So I think being conscious about these things and speaking about them, keep sharing with your colleagues, both male and female, uh, goes a long way in identification of these biases. Of course, from a team diversity perspective also, our IC, for example, is a 40% female member team. Our overall team is also 30% female, can be better. But our pipeline, unfortunately, from a founder perspective, is very thin on women, like very similar to you guys. And there we periodically assess where we are going wrong in terms of how many deals we are sourcing that are women founders with women active roles in the senior management or benefiting female customers in some way. One very practical challenge that I've observed in some of my portfolio companies is the field level jobs where you're supposed to be on a bike 12 hours a day. You're coming back home at 9-10 p.m. in the night, and those are some of the roles that especially in the tier 2, tier 3 towns, women are not able to take. Where we have seen that companies who are able to reserve some roles which do not require long stretch hours, are more back-end in nature for these women employees goes a long way. So like an operative role or some back-end role or the female role could be reserved for them. What we also do is actively track the senior level management in a portfolio company, both that we are looking forward to invest in and also what we have invested in. So looking at how the executive level positions, how women are growing, how their promotions are going is something that we actively track. And one more real life example here is that there was one company that we were diligencing, and what we always do is a founder background check, in which a very important part is to talk to ex-employees of that company. And in one particular case, the ex-employees were 100% women, and that was a clear pattern that was identified, and it was questioned. So that is also something that investors could look out for, like what kind of environments these founders are creating in their organizations, and what kind of how women are feeling. You just go to the office, you can easily scan and see percentage of women on the floor, and very easily find out how comfortable they feel working in that environment. So some of these are my thoughts.
Thank you so much for that. That was a very useful insight as well. And I think with investors, investor engagement can go a really long way with the investee companies. So it really becomes a responsibility of the investors to be able to do that kind of engagement, even if it is difficult to adhere to a minimum number of, say, percentage of women founders and so on. I think I'll come to Julie now. Your experience, especially in terms of facilitating the ecosystem and facilitating enterprises on actually looking at impact measurement and reporting post-investment, and also any kind of technical assistance prior to the investment would also be useful in understanding how you can look at gender integration.
So we work with founders first to first understand what are the KPIs that the founder looks at. And since we work with only climate tech, this is one of the KPIs, of course, are the climate KPIs. But very, about 2-3 years back, we started also actively looking at the gender KPI as well, and developed this gender climate framework to give some sort of framework, to it. One of the key things that then we started doing is then going to the investor and presenting this framework as well. Like, look at it and tell us what you think of it, whether you would like to add something. So this framework is kind of tested out with startups and with investors both. So the impact KPIs that we see are divided up into 3 different types of how do we inculcate gender into climate. One is, of course, within the team. So as was spoken by my fellow panelists, within the team, how is the founder looking at a gender integration? So whether it is through hiring policies, making sure that senior management is well balanced, looking at all of the other staff also being well balanced, so not kind of looking at the like gender roles, so only like specific job opportunities are for specific genders, for example, and things like that. So within the organization, gender integration. The other portion is the operational part of it. So when the company is in operations, what are the gender considerations to take? So that becomes like, okay, in the supply chain, if you're looking to work with other vendors, then are you actively sourcing for a woman-led vendor, for example? Is it equitable, your sourcing of vendors? If you're working with other smaller companies, then are you looking at their gender integration within their company, right? So and also then if you're working with women informal workers and things like that, then basic sanitation needs, policies around that. What is a safe workplace environment for both within the team, within your own organization, as well as organizations that you're actively engaging with during operations. So this is the second pillar. The third pillar is where we see a very strong integration of climate and gender, and that is through the product and service. What is the impact that's been created, right? And the impact that's been created, how are we looking at it through a climate lens and a gender lens? So for example, when we're looking at a KPI of say energy access, then can we look at it just from a perspective of a climate lens that okay, X number of people got energy, and then if it is generally what we see in our tech space is that there is an integration of energy access and increasing of energy efficiency. So there's also mitigation indicators there, right? GHG reduction indicators. But a very allied impact, for example, that comes out is when we increase access to energy, then that directly affects the woman in the household. And then how do we look at the well-being of the women, and that translates to the economic indicators for women directly. So what is the increase in the income that we're seeing for a woman? For we had a company that looked at solar lighting, which was a very efficient way of solar street lighting. So of course the GHG indicators were there that okay, X number of women are impacted as well because they get access to better lighting measures. But a third very important, very gender focused impact was that women start feeling safer because the streets are lighted. And the woman had a bad experience before because of dark alleys, and she was very passionate to bring forth this impact that don't sideline this impact. This is one of the major impacts that I'm having through my business. And that was really interesting for us. So she's like, I don't care what investors want to look at. This is the impact area that I'm not going to take away from my slide on impact when fundraising. So very allied impacts like that. Now, for example, in a startup which was doing energy access, we were looking at the community impact, and one of the key impacts that we saw was women were able to in their small scale businesses like small shops, etc., because they had access to lighting, they could keep their shops open for a longer time, and that itself leads to a higher economic return for a woman, right? So very specific things like that. In a mobility startup, for example, the last mile mobility startup, when we assess their strategies around marketing, we saw that the marketing was exclusionary to women. All of their posters had men going on bikes and reaching, and that automatically sends the message that you're not catering to women, right? So a lot of these sustainable mobility solutions, e-bikes are coming up in the space that are looking at, and all of them report their KPIs to be GHG KPIs. But just catering to a women segment, and also in the survey that was done, for example, it was shown that women don't have access to vehicles same like men. So many women walk extra to reach a public transportation than a man would. Right? So they are the segment that actually requires the last mile connectivity a lot more. Also, if they're traveling after hours, the safety issue comes in, that you're coming at a late timing, and then a lot of pressure comes that, okay, don't go to work. And so you can solve so many things around women and their problems if you cater to a woman segment in the last mile community, last mile connectivity. And they started catering to it, and they had a lot of branding around women being on bikes and things like that, and they got an increase in segment of women, which was that, it became one of their primary target segments. So just being aware of the KPIs that you actually should look at can change customer segments, can change what kind of investor also you look at. So moving beyond just the climate tech investor who's looking at gender can also be an investor that invests in your business. So I think before investing, just making sure that there's enough mentorship about really looking at KPIs and what works for the company and what doesn't. And then post investment, working with the investor to make them understand the impact KPIs is also important. And just one last point is that there are many quantitative KPIs, and we work on measuring whatever we can measure at the best of the capabilities. But when it comes to social KPIs and things like that, it becomes hard, and also the methodologies are not that robust. You may not get the right quantitative metrics there, but I feel like the investor should also look at the qualitative metrics with equal importance, because so much nuance there that comes out, and that becomes important while understanding the space.
Very interesting insights. Actually, I was thinking when you shared the experience of the lighting, sometimes the gendered experience is not obvious to to men, for example, right? And it's important to share such an experience or such a KPI so that you are able to integrate that within your reporting and within your impact metrics. And the other part is when you cater your products and services to women, you actually have an economic case to do it, because you're opening up the segment of your customers and of your buyers as well. So I think it goes a long way, not just from an impact perspective, but from an economic perspective. So just wanted to highlight that before we move on. I think in the interest of time, maybe we should move on to our workshop segment, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, everyone. So I think we've said enough as a panel. We'd want to have inputs and insights now from the audience, and we have like a very practical exercise. So I'll just request all the entrepreneurs on one side and all the investors on one side, and if there are any ecosystem players, we can create like a third segment for them. Quickly, and we'll just also we can join them. So I think we'll also circulate worksheets. So entrepreneurs here, investors here.
We're advisors.
You can join the investors. I think we'll see. We'll balance out.
Okay, fine.
Yes. Two entrepreneurs or more?
I mean, I think I can probably represent all.
Okay. Sure, you need more here.
If you are advisors to
So we'll have the first sheet. Let's give the first sheet to the entrepreneurs for now. In the interest of and all are investors, right? So you can just probably take a pencil and mark where you are currently on the scale. So this is the MIT framework that we developed, and it has the entire sourcing, what you can do as at the sourcing stage. Thank you. So you can just mark yourself and your
We are ecosystem actors.
come.
What? No, I mean, what role do we collectively? I think.
Yeah, I think. Okay. So okay, first the investor. I think one of y'all can take the investor and one of you.
What are the kind of main responsibilities
Yeah. So the idea is for the entrepreneurs to fill in their you are
Neither ecosystem.
okay. I'll give you one. I think ecosystem we can have
Sorry.
investor.
You want to come? Okay.
The investor, yeah.
Not invest.
Okay, then. You.
No, I'm just kidding out.
Okay. So I'll just request all the people who have the investor sheet, which is the sourcing, to just mark yourselves quickly on the scale. And all the entrepreneurs can fill in their pain points across the different stages. Yes, I think we should.
When you go to be invested.
Are you done? Can we move to the next stage? Okay, now I'll just request one entrepreneur, everyone who has the sheet of an entrepreneur, to match with any one investor and discuss. We'll share what we.
So we can match.
Yes, anyone who one is to one. Yeah. So one person with an entrepreneur sheet and one person with an investor sheet comes together, and you can just quickly share what are your pain points with the investor, and then together they've done an exercise. They can probably suggest and reflect on what are the opportunities. The last row you all can fill together on how we can reach out and source more women entrepreneurs. So just one is to one. Everyone has a sheet. Yes.
I thought only one of
No,
them.
no, no. I guess all of them have filled the sheet, right?
Yeah, we don't
So then, okay, then 2 is to 1.
I can match it. Right?
You can plan someone at the other.
Match and like things come together.
Do you want to do?
Logan is my friend. I got it. Like, okay,
Okay, why don't you speak?
okay, okay, fine. Hi.
Hi.
Great to meet you. Share your pain points identify authoritative confident what are the avenues from where I can do it? I would not know the reason for us to I would not equity, I would not or I would not know what
breakthrough guys.
then I would not take for you. I would not know. I just would or maybe I should go and
It's more difficult male investor easier than a woman investor.
That's a blind spot.
it's a blind spot.
If women invest creating more comfortable space for women, that's not a case.
Or you will but you know that
don't know what you chose. And they don't follow
Women investor.
yeah, everybody can have
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
subconsciously we are facing it. And then when I started preparing, I placed an investment readiness line.
Someone else knows what those someone else are made.
I don't know how I should value my skills. I should not, I don't think there's a real deep decision that I should not and say and yeah, I think there is no gender dynamic take a chunk of my life. And because I know that I did not have not a kind of choice that my experience is when supposing I have if there is a gender dynamic, there will be a gender dynamic when it comes to promotion.
Then pass around the mic quickly, 2 or 3 insights.
Humble request. We will keep this all by 5:30. This 5:30.
So if my mother is an Asian, I have started a financial services.
Sure.
So
if I can just pass around the mic quickly, and if there were as investors,
I just reach out to fintech for SME and MSME, so I'll do reach out to you.
Immediately at your
So I think many perspectives was from the point of view that we are simply not aware that we are not putting in the effort, and because of we not putting in the effort, those unconscious constraints are coming in. Another thing I noticed is that the person running a team, a lot of these initiatives have no budget implications. So therefore, it's completely something which we are aligned to support. Because that's so far we've not been doing for the investors and never minded it.
So what are the 2 things that you change from tomorrow?
Have a conversation with the team to figure out, first is the low-hanging fruit in terms of sourcing and just being conscious. And I think the next step is from a long-term perspective, what can we do to institutionalize our processes.
Super, thank you. Thank you, Akshay. Can I move to the speaker?
Yeah. So one thing which clearly noticeable was that there are no 2 women entrepreneurs together. So we don't know that whenever it comes to an some company or organizations, we feel that if there is a woman entrepreneur, there should be a male one, joining her. Even the investors feel that where is the male entrepreneur? It's like look out for them and see where are they and why are they not there. The question always comes that why is not there a male entrepreneur? So that also question comes. And similarly, I was just talking with Chavi also. So she also told she's never come across an investee company which has 2 entrepreneurs. So this is also thinking point. Why is not there? Is there lack of opportunity or lack of friendship between 2 females that they cannot come together and start a company? So this was one of the main things which we could see. Remaining, we see that women entrepreneurs or applicants, especially in we have seen a good scale in the MFI, that they are the ones who have repaid and shown the repayment well, that is why I think many of the NBFCs, especially the MFIs, encourage women applicants too. So even if they are not the earning member, maybe the earning, but still they ensure that their husbands repay them on time. So that is why if the MFI industry, such a low income, generating GLGs models have been successful with a woman, I'm sure this should be scaled up to a larger, forum.
So I know you are an ecosystem player, but is there anything that you took back that you can implement or start talking about from tomorrow, which you'd like to change?
No, that's what I think. The first point, I think the first point is that if there is a female entrepreneur or whatever, I feel so that if they are hesitant in some way, I think we should encourage them to speak more. When there is a male and a female entrepreneur, I should ask the male entrepreneur, let the female entrepreneur speak first and share the main points and share it on difficult subjects also, like negotiation, like valuation. We should encourage the female entrepreneur to speak and suggest the valuation. Why should the male entrepreneur come and negotiate with the investor? is one thing I should say that.
Super, thank you. This group?
Okay, so actually we have just started a new fund this April. So and also I haven't experienced much sourcing of the section those kind of things. But while talking with her, like I could know there are many gender bias or those kind of things, and also like the difficulties to access to the stakeholders to raise the funds compared with the men due to the those kind of differences between men and women regarding the gender things. So yeah. I think we should. I have to understand more what is the difficulties, challenges, because we want to of course include more and more women entrepreneurs also. So right now we have some advisors which is which has experience in this domain, and she's a very knowledgeable woman. She's a very good advisor. So we asked actually just started this fund. She also suggests us maybe you should accommodate around more than 15% of the women entrepreneurs in the we will have a residency program. So residency program, we should have more than 50 entrepreneurs, and also I know there's some sourcing partners, those kind of things. So that we should think more. I've never thought about this kind of difficulties. So I haven't much knowledge. So from now, as a company also, we have to build the good structures. And also at first, we have to understand what's going on, the programs, something like this.
Super, thank you so much for sharing that so honestly, and it's a great time for you since you're starting new. I think would request everyone to take this back as a framework to all the investors. In your own companies or even as ecosystem enablers, if you're working with a few investors, even if everyone takes 1 or 2 steps, I think we move a few steps forward. So that's the end of the exercise. I think that's it from my end today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we know we kept you all late, but thank you so much again for joining us for the session. Thank you.
Yes, sure.